Hello and welcome to the news on HOMEF TV. I am Kome Odomo. Here's the highlights. Accountability and decommissioning for better Niger Delta. Health strategy. The mandate to confront environmental injustice in the Niger Delta. HOMEF School of Ecology igniting ecological consciousness. Now the news in details. The Niger Delta sits on one of the world's most ecological damaged landscape, a region whose natural wealth has been extracted for decades, while its communities absorbed compounding costs of pollution, abandoned infrastructure, and political neglect. The fifth Niger Delta Alternative Convergence brought together environmental justice advocates and grassroots movements to examine the crisis with renewed urgency. The convergence focused on decommissioning abandoned oil infrastructure, environmental accountability, and remediation. Our correspondent Onome Etisoro completes the report.
The convergence paid particular attention to the escalating problem of asset divestment, in which multinational oil companies are transferring polluted facilities to local operators without adequate cleanup or functioning accountability frameworks. Participants characterized this as a dangerous laundering of environmental liability, one that deepens ecological destruction, weakens regulatory oversight, and leaves communities exposed. The gathering opened with reflections on a paradox that has defined the region for decades: the enormous natural resource wealth that has coexisted with deep poverty, ecological devastation, and political abandonment. Participants insisted that the crisis can no longer be framed as merely environmental. It is a question of justice, governance, and intergenerational responsibility. Participants rejected any framing of decommissioning as merely burying disused facilities on the ground or underwater. Abandoned oil wells, leaking pipes, and gas flares were described as ecological time bombs, and calls were made for immediate environmental audits, transparent accountability mechanisms, and the replacement of aging infrastructure across the region.
We must use this platform to demand concrete actions. One, immediate containment and remediation of the Oro 1 fire and other oil wells across Niger Delta that have been abandoned, that are spilling oil and flaring gases and destroying our environment. We need independent monitoring and compensation for the affected communities. 2, enforcement, and even before enforcement, amendment of the Petroleum Industrial Act, where blames and responsibility are on the leaders of the community, while government have no or little responsibility. It needs to be amended, and the ones that bring development and accountability must be enforced.
We have had 20 years of experimenting on advocacy, doing the things that we're comfortable with. But this is the moment, this is the season to make some adjustments, to massify our activities, to contend for space is more. Because these brigands who call themselves politicians have taken away a lot of spaces. Civic spaces have been stolen by these brigands. Young men and women coming out of the universities have been turned into thugs. We have to contend for those spaces with these thugs and reclaim our people to become agents of change.
NDAC starts from the premise that there's a solution to every challenge. We also believe that the shortest way to get out of a pit is to stop digging further into it. NDAC also insists that we never forget that oil and gas are not renewable resources, and our best interest is to secure the integrity of our environment and the array of gifts that nature has bestowed upon us. Oil wells will eventually dry out. Gas wells will eventually dry out. The world would either exhaust petroleum resources or move away and embark on a new regime of energy from other resources. We have to wake up to these facts.
Panel discussions brought together legal, advocacy, and community perspectives on the path forward. Contributors emphasized the need for strategic litigation, grassroots mobilization, and rigorous documentation of any viable environmental justice strategy.
Both government and corporation have to be intentional. The demand is restoration, remediation, reparations, and that should be done. We should see measurable indicators that is pointing to restoration and remediation and reparation. We need to see that. In the case of Otwabagi, our research indicated that there is no access to clean water. Out of all the sources of water in that community, is only one borehole installed by NDDC that is clean and safe for drinking. As at the time we conducted the research, that borehole was not even providing water. But after that, advocacy and all that, it has started providing water, but it's inadequate for community members.
The Barrister report, the challenge for us is what steps do we take to ensure that Governor Oyediri, because governments are, the instrumentality of government resides in individuals. So whether it is Governor Oyediri or Minister Henrikin Lokobri, the steps that we must take to ensure that they perform their duties. So the long and short of it is initiative. Somebody must take those steps, whether legal or through public advocacy, those steps that will ensure that the objective standards of legal obligation, decommissioning, development, are actually implemented.
I'm a perception creating person. I belong to the industry where we do a lot with our eyes. So let me tell you, every time you want to tell the story of the Niger Delta, somebody wants to direct how that story is told. They want you to elaborate on militancy and how your people stand up against one another. They never want you to tell the story of pollution and its effect on people. This is about perception. So one group of Niger Delta people tell you, it's our fault. Our boys do this, our girls do that, and as my brother said, we don't come be like a shower where everybody like, but nobody they pay correct money for.
The fifth INDAC closed with a reaffirmation of the INDAC manifesto as a living framework for justice, accountability, ecological restoration, and collective action, and with renewed demands for immediate decommissioning of derelict oil facilities, comprehensive environmental remediation and ecological restoration, compensation and reparations for impacted communities, transparent audits of abandoned infrastructure, stronger regulatory enforcement, community-centered environmental governance, and an end to the expansion of fossil fuel extraction on land that has not yet recovered from the last 50 years of it. The Convergence's closing recognition was unambiguous. The struggle for the Niger Delta is, ultimately, a struggle for dignity, survival, and the rights of communities to determine what happens to their own territories. Onome Etisiero for HOMEF TV.
Environmental activists, civil society experts, and community leaders came together to strategize and plan to strengthen organizing efforts around environmental destruction, oil pollution, and community rights in Nigeria. The workshop focused on equipping participants with practical campaign planning tools, while also creating a shared framework for coordinating action. Throughout the session, participants reflected on how social change happens and identify key principles necessary for effective campaigns. Our correspondent Stanley Egolo has the details.
During the meeting, the discussions emphasized the importance of clearly identifying problems, understanding root causes, building collective solidarity, gathering evidence, engaging affected communities, and developing strategic advocacy approaches. Participants highlighted the need to understand systems of power, identify allies and opponents, and choose tactics that can generate meaningful pressure for change. A major focus of the workshop was the ongoing environmental crisis surrounding the Ororo Well 1 fire and other forms of ecological devastation affecting coastal communities. Participants stressed that the affected communities continue to face environmental destruction while authorities and corporate actors fail to respond adequately. Discussions also focused heavily on campaign infrastructure and movement building. Participants agreed that the emerging campaign requires a clear identity, leadership structure, communication strategy, fundraising mechanisms, and digital presence. Communication was repeatedly identified as essential to the campaign's success, particularly the need for strong messaging, effective storytelling, media engagement, and social media visibility to amplify community voices and generate broader public attention. Participants committed to continuing the work beyond the workshop by strengthening partnerships, training others in their communities, expanding media advocacy, engaging policymakers, and building broader environmental justice networks. There was a shared understanding that the workshop was not a one-time event, but the beginning of a sustained campaign process aimed at environmental restoration, accountability, and community protection. The workshop highlighted the importance of partnerships and coalition building. Participants emphasized the value of collaborating with researchers, media practitioners, universities, grassroots organizations, legal advocates, and international solidarity networks. The workshop concluded with a renewed optimism, solidarity, and collective commitment to transform ideas into coordinated action for environmental justice. Stanley Egolo for HOMEF TV.
A two-day technical stakeholder engagement and town hall meeting on the health consequences of petroleum pollution in the Niger Delta, convened under the International Working Group on Fossil Fuel Pollution and Just Transition, focused on the report by the Bayelsa State Oil and Environmental Commission, which remains a critical need to broaden public awareness, deepen scientific documentation, and translate findings into concrete, actionable strategies for mitigation and change. The BOSEC report follows decades of poorly regulated fossil fuel production and oil exploration in the Niger Delta region, resulting in severe environmental degradation. Our correspondent Esele Ojanelo has more.
Environmental injustice pose an ongoing menace to the region, communities, and livelihood sources, as documented by decades of unregulated fossil fuel extraction and its effects across the Niger Delta. The session produced clear calls to action as participants stressed the need to implement the recommendations of the BSOC report and related studies, rather than allow findings to accumulate in archives. They called for access to internationally accredited laboratories to ensure research integrity and peer review standards, systematic digital documentation of pollution data, and replication of existing studies in other affected regions. The challenge of enforcement was also raised directly, with regulators acknowledging structural barriers to compelling compliance from oil operators. On the path forward, the meeting identified stronger environmental regulations, coordinated pressure on government, environmental remediation as an urgent priority, and cross-sector partnerships as the key levers for translating evidence into policy change.
We are members of the IWG, and as members of the IWG, we were decommissioned. Our work formally was decommissioned in 2024, once we submitted a report to the Bayelsa State government. As individuals, we are doing this as part of our commitment to Bayelsa and the Niger Delta. Bringing together key stakeholders ensures that we keep that on the agenda. We are engaging with key stakeholders here, but we're also engaging with the Bayelsa State government. We're engaging with international partners to ensure, as I said, one, that we carry on doing more research. that we begin to think about how can we bring immediate relief to the people of Bayelsa. And we cannot do that on our own. We have to do that in collaboration with the people on the ground, with funding agencies, with regulatory agencies, with WHO and the like. And as you can see in the room, we have people from the WHO, we have people from Nostra, we have people from the Ministry of Health and the like. So that is, if you like, the pathway towards ensuring that something happens. But of course, ultimately what we want is that the full 10 recommendations of the report be implemented.
It's a call on the federal government to implement the recommendations of the Bayelsa Commission report. Those recommendations are very clear. Unfortunately, we have not seen an appreciation by the federal government of the gravity of the situation. We are also very disappointed with the Tinubu government that allowed the international oil companies like Shell to sell off their toxic assets to certain unknown corporations. And what they have just basically done is to dump liabilities upon the Nigerian government and upon the communities in the Niger Delta. This is unacceptable. Everywhere in the world, there's an understanding that those that are responsible for pollution should pay.
The reports have been presented at different levels in Yenegua, in Abuja, and several times outside Nigeria. But I don't think much sensitization and awareness creation about that report has been done in Bayelsa State. And that is part of what we are doing, presenting it to Bayelsa people. And those of us that are working in civil society organizations, working in communities, we also have the responsibility to take the findings of this report to the communities.
Participants confirmed what communities have long known, that residents face chronic exposure to benzene, sulfur dioxide, carbon monoxide, hydrocarbons, and heavy metals, a toxic burden that has persisted across generations with inadequate regulatory response.
The truth is that if you have a report there and you keep it on your shelf, it will not amount to much. And so everyone in the nooks and crannies of Bayelsa State should know. Every journalist should talk about it every week, every month, every year. So this is like everyone should know and demand. Because the law says that if you do not demand, for instance, you will not be given. So people must know enough to demand for what they should have, the remediation of the environment. And because if you look at the environment ordinarily, you will see a beautiful green everywhere. You see the rivers looking beautiful. But the truth is that that is a beautiful ailment.
Based on these recommendations, we will try as much as we can for the federal government to implement and for the people to be part of the implementation. You're also aware that issues of oil and gas are on the exclusive list. So the Bayelsa State as a government will have limited progression to make on that. But be rest assured, like His Excellency the Deputy Governor has said, and His Excellency the Governor has also said, that we will support you like we supported you in terms of creating an enabling environment for you to go for your field work and bring data for us to work with.
The event served as a platform for dialogue, knowledge sharing, advocacy, and policy recommendations to protect human health and promote environmental sustainability, calling on the government to enact reforms and take urgent action to mitigate further hazards through environmental remediation, while pointing out the challenges faced by regulators in a bid to enforce implementation. Others stressed the importance of a partnership that translates into policy reforms to promote stronger environmental regulations and enforcement and foster collaboration among stakeholders towards sustainable solutions. Esele Ojanelo, HOMEF TV.
We'll take a short break, and when we return, we'll take you to Benin City, where we had the Etiwin School of Ecology. Stay tuned. What are some of the barriers that you have faced with the media?
Part of what we faced is the weaponization of the digital media for by corporations. They weaponize these against social justice, against everything we believe in. They weaponize it against protecting planet and the people. They've taken this to another dimension with the coming of AI. Why we look at even regulations to control the use of AI and as regards to even their climate impacts, we should also begin to look at how, again, can we also use this to scale our work. And in doing that, I think we should stay our truth. We should not be drawn in any way to adopt like the fake strategies that they use. Because in my village, they say the lies can run for 20 years, one evening, truth will catch up with it. So let's stay to our truth. And our truth is the environment needs to be protected. The local livelihoods needs to be protected. Homegrown food is healthy. We need to protect the climate.
Welcome back. The one-week HOMEF School of Ecology on Igniting Ecological Consciousness brought together environmental advocates, scholars, activists committed to advancing ecological justice, climate action, and community-centered development. The gathering created a platform for critical reflection on climate justice, extractivism, governance, indigenous knowledge system, food sovereignty, and sustainable alternatives for Africa's future. One major area of focus was the need to rethink dominant ideas of development. Our correspondent, DBA Augusta, completes the report.
Discussions explored ecological justice as a framework grounded in equity, accountability, intergenerational responsibility, and respect for both human and other beings. Ecological justice was the central focus of the meeting, with facilitators emphasizing that environmental destruction and social injustice are interconnected. Vulnerable communities often bear the greatest environmental burdens, while corporations and political elites benefit from extractive systems. The school examined the politics of hunger and food systems in Africa. Scholars reflected on how food insecurity is driven not simply by a lack of production, but also by government failures, insecurity, corporate control, and environmental degradation. Conversations around African environmentalism, advocacy, and environmental governance explored how colonialism and capitalism disrupted African ecological systems rooted in collective stewardship and respect for nature.
Colonialism is about domination. It's also about forcing others to submit to the will of the metropole, of the colonizer. After colonialism, we have neocolonialism. The only thing that changes is the key players directing the affairs of things. Otherwise, it's all the same. Colonialism was driven by foreigners. Neocolonialism is driven by Nigerians or by Africans, but still with the same mindset, otherwise known as coloniality. In Pidgin, we call it colonial mentality.
Hunger politics is one of the two main, if you've read about HOMEF, is one of the two main areas of our work, right? And at the core of what we do in that space is the question, why are people hungry? Is it merely a function of productivity? If we answer this question, then we are well on our way to solving the food crisis.
You cannot really be in this business without ideological leaning. It is not possible, because in the long run, it will become obvious. Why ideology is important in challenging power is that the power you are challenging is based on an ideology, but a negative one. It is just like saying, I don't like these politicians in Nigeria. I want them out of office. The politicians, like we say in Nigeria, politics doesn't have ideology. That is not entirely true. The issue is that it is a negative ideology. It is an ideology of theft, prebendalism.
Facilitators encourage participants to rethink development through African values of community, solidarity, dignity, and environmental protection. Participants reflected on the importance of preserving traditional ecological practices and community-based systems that have sustained societies for generations.
This particular School of Ecology for 2026 helped me in understanding more systems like the extractivism and also politics relating to food sovereignty. I build on the knowledge I had, and I am now equipped with knowledge.
It's been a wonderful experience. I mean, I've heard from lawyers who spoke so much well about the environment and how to be an activist or an advocate to the environment, you need to embody courage, because advocating for the environment it's not an easy one, because you face a lot of challenges.
Africa is not poor, that we just need to think for ourselves and implement and use our natural resources for ourselves, for the betterment of ourselves.
Participants left empowered with knowledge, strategies and solidarity to continue organizing for a just, equitable and ecologically balanced society. Dibia Augusta for HOMEF TV.
In an evening of music, dance, testimonies and performance reflecting the struggles, resilience and hope of communities in the Niger Delta, the powerful display of cultural resistance took center stage at a special event titled The Land Speaks, Songs, Dance and Testimonies for Ecological Justice. Rather than just policy papers and protest signs, the story of environmental degradation was told through the rhythm of drums and the voices of those living in frontline communities of climate crisis. Our correspondent Onome Etisuru was there to witness the fusion of heritage and hope. The report.
Fire don dey burn on top river. When fire don dey burn for inside stream, when fire don dey burn for inside well, now water dem dey take quench fire. But if the fire dey burn on top water, wetin we wan take quench am? How we wan take quench am? Who go help us quench am? Fire! Fire! Bide is on fire! Una help me shout! Bide is on fire!
They walk in the night. We must put up the light, quench the gas flare, expose their greed, because the oil only flows when the earth bleeds. In conference halls, we talk in gardens of stones. The ocean waves bait our eyes. But in Ogoni land, but in the Niger Delta, we can't even breathe, because the oil only flows when the earth bleeds.
It began with a low hum, a song of the ancestors, but the message quickly shifted from the past to a turbulent present. The Land Speaks. It's not just a concert. It is a sonic map of a region grappling with decades of oil pollution and ecological neglect. Through fluid choreography and haunting melodies, performers from across the Delta illustrated the transformation of their pristine waters into what they call the Black Death.
This evening really shows the power of storytelling, how it can connect, how we can carry our message to the people in a way that is real, is visceral, and that can connect. I think this is the first of this kind of events that we're doing, and we really believe that there is power in the voice of the people, and that it is the people who can create change. It is the people who can challenge the ills in the society.
It was extremely powerful to see this in action, to see plays and music and hear songs and dance, all depicting the struggle, the realities that people live. Of course, we know all of this. I've been studying this for many, many years, 30 years. But to see it on stage, it felt really real. It was very moving, very powerful, and it just shows just what we can do with arts and culture.
We are only trying to tell our stories, the Niger Delta people, how far we've come, what has been our problems when it comes to oil pollution, and lay our voice through drama to tell the world that we are highly affected by this oil pollution, and that we need We need the government, we need the people to understand how to control it so we have a peaceful environment.
The evening reached a somber peak during the performance, but the night ended not in despair, but in a call to action.
What they see here now, people from different communities, where they come tell their story themselves through songs, through dance, through drama, to say this is now what they see for our land, what oil companies and the government don't do, the way they don't destroy the land, and the way they call the creative climate change on top. And the people, they speak the stock of the land, say this pollution go stop. And the message where everybody they talk today, they say, we're not going to keep quiet again, we go unite, we go struggle until the land clean.
Told them that violence is not the only solution. Change starts from you and I. Stop oil pollution, stop gas flaring, stop pouring dead into the gutter and allow the river to flow properly. This oil pollution must stop. Yes, it must stop.
Onome Etisiro for HOMEF TV.
A beautiful report, Onome. This is a reminder that the fight for the planet is often a fight for our home. Thank you for staying with us, and we've come to the end of today's bulletin. Remember to follow us on all our Echo HOMEF social media handles and subscribe to our YouTube channel. I'm Kome Odomo.